What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. Today we're going to be debunking some misconceptions and building upon our knowledge base on how to manipulate team comps surrounding the idea of healing. The most important misconception being there's a lot of players that rank or sort the support characters based on their healing power. But that's not how the pros do it. That's not how they've ever done it, in fact. In organized Overwatch play, instead, there's main support and flex support. There is no main healer, because you shouldn't be thinking of the support characters as how much healing they're going to be giving into you, but instead, what utility they bring to the team comp you're playing. This is especially important when you need to lean in to a playstyle rather than try to bandage up a losing strategy with more healing. We're going to break down a few examples of what I mean. The first one being, if you look at our team comp, we have players on our team that want to run Wrecking Ball, and we have a Sombra player who's willing to swap to main tank. However, I'm queued with someone who is a off-tank specialist. So instead of simply filling into roles that seem to fit some sort of arbitrary 2-2-2 meta, we in fact build what is a more of a pro-style triple DPS comp, cheating in the Sombra in the support slot, because when you play in this type of team comp, it can utterly destroy teams that don't know how to play up against it. Every engagement is going to look like this, but it starts off bad immediately for this enemy team. They're running this Rein Zarya Death Ball, and with our mass mobility and disruption, with Lucio, D.Va, and Wrecking Ball all booping their tanks out of the play, and having an entire suite of flanking characters spinning circles around the enemy, this fight is a major mismatch. And on paper, I think a lot of players would look at these two team comps and say that the first one is the more stable one, with Zenyatta and Ana and the Brigitte backbone. They have tons of healing, but in fact, it's our team comp that fits the game mode better. Control, or King of the Hill, of course, is a fragging mode, which is often why pros almost always run dive v dive, and if you ever even dream of running a Reinhardt Zarya up here, you must have a Lucio, or else you will just simply get farmed by mobility engages like we're just exploiting on this enemy team like this. This works for a few reasons. We've already kind of discussed in this channel why Hammond and D.Va are a very good initiation tank duo in sort of the new age dive, but even more so when you have a character like Sombra on your team, she doesn't require healing herself, and when she hacks health packs, she amplifies the effectiveness of a character like Tracer, who oftentimes is surviving on the fringes of the map using health packs herself. Combined with the fact that my Lucio play can get into the mess of things, deal my own damage and disruption while healing the team, it's not like they can simply dive our solo healer either, because I'm never going to get caught out. I have more speed, they don't have any mobility at all, so they just get danced around entirely. We'll show one pro example of what I mean here, and this is a playoff match between the #1 ranked South Korean contenders team Runaway versus MVP Space. To be fair, both teams are running a fairly low healing support setup, Mercy Zen Pharmacy with a lot of ranged poke, whereas Runaway is running the fast aggro Lucio Brigitte, which is a hilariously low amount of healing, of course, but what they're able to exploit here is the fact that Brigitte, despite being weak to the range characters Pharah and Widow, holds her own on the front line. There's a certain amount of healing requirement your team drops when you have Brigitte on your team. You can have presence on the objective with a mini shield, and in many ways, Brigitte is more stable to run in that type of position than even a Reinhardt is, and especially even more than the dive tanks, because normally the dive tanks have to stand there and take range poke and sort of dance around and avoid angles of damage. Brigitte actually can just stand there holding the line with a 600 health point barrier, and because it's small, it's actually a bit harder to focus down than the very large Reinhardt barrier. Also, there's another aspect that makes this quite devastating for Runaway as well. Because they're using two supports that typically don't get run together to do the majority of their healing, if they succeed in playing this way, they get their Lucio and Brigitte ultimates up way faster than you would expect them to in another context. And then when you get all these zippy mobile characters with armor on them, it gives them a big advantage into that very crucial third fight when the enemy's ultimates are also coming online. In fact, Twilight's able to build up 2 rallies in this round, and that more or less is the nail in the coffin for MVP Space. Because they play the footsie game so well, MVP Space is forced to swap their Zenyatta. They go on to the Lucio here. But it's important to notice how the entirety of Runaway plays around having a lower amount of heals overall. They have to be sure to avoid fights that are going to be bad for them. So when they see the sound barrier, they all run away. Then they cast their own sound barrier, and that's when they go aggressive. That constant peel back, disengage, re-engage footsie battle is masterfully done. And then there's the other reason why dive tanks specifically have always paired very well with low amounts of healing is that their ultimates essentially give them a second life. So here they're able to bottle up the choke, and Bumper's allowed to hold his ground until he goes low, and he's not looking for healing to bail him out. Instead, he's looking for an opportunity to pop the Primal Rage and then go aggressive, which he does. Throughout all the chaos of all this fighting, who can really MVP space lock down? They probably have to target the Brigitte, but as we all know, fighting Brigitte is one of the worst ways to try to counter her, because it just takes so many resources and getting a good angle on her, but that's probably the only option MVP space had. When Runaway plays in this way with this comp, it's a massive skill check on the enemy, because they're playing with less sustain resources, but more offensive resources. At least for their team. Of course, I think the Brigitte, instead of the Zenyatta there, just all of a sudden turns the flex support slot into a rock for the team to play around, whereas before, normally you would think of the Zen as the easy exploitable dive target. Here's another example of a ranked game where we got this to work. Typically when you play up at GM rank, there's a ton of DPS players, so you actually do have to learn how to play this way. And to start here, when I see that we're going to have double sniper and an attack Junkrat, I'm playing with PvP Twitch here, legendary Junkrat, but also general flex player. He's kind of an all trick, if you will. I was going to play Mercy in order to help enable the snipers, but PvP says no, go back to the Lucio that we ran earlier, because in actuality, playing with the Lucio allows us to have a bit more space, a bit more control on the rest of the battlefield, on the enemy's front line, even though we're going to be dropping some sustain for our snipers on the back line. And this ends up largely working out, because we're able to take space, and oddly enough, me now as the Lucio in this situation, command a lot of space, similar to how I was doing on Nepal's Shrine, where I'm like manipulating the front line, putting down point presence, protecting some of my carries. In this case, the Zenyatta, who they're trying to chase after. These are aspects of the game of Overwatch that I think you don't see at the majority of ranks, but it's the reason why for a very long time of Overwatch's life cycle, Lucio Zen was actually the meta. And part of that is because if you're able to use your movement in order to chase down Discord orbs, avoid damage and deal more damage yourself overall as a team from every position, that's how you outskill the enemy. Basic FPS mechanics, even if you're going back to games like Quake, in a 1v1 duel, you want to avoid getting hit and sneak in hits where you can. And oftentimes in the game of Overwatch, characters that are more mobile don't work as well with big healing combos. And I think that's something people often forget, which I'll try to explain in this last section where we talk about the difference between a pocket DPS and a self-sustaining one, which is the premise that all of this is built around. Granted, on this Junkertown game, there's a few caveats. One, the attacker side is largely favored anyway, so much so that you could just put Bastion on the cart and typically get it very far as well, but we're succeeding here with a triple DPS strategy. Granted, we do have two healers in this instance, but I think you can see, based on the way that me and my Genji are playing, we don't necessarily need big healing numbers in order to take over this game. We're doing it through flanking presence and multiple angles of attack, which is how you allow your playstyle in order to require less healing overall. And when you do that, then you're able to leverage more powerful abilities like damage, of course. If you play in a way that requires healing, in a lower skilled way, like with a 3-3 GOATS comp, where the whole team is bundled together brawling, needing healing to even work, there's sort of a distinct cap-off to the amount of skill you can put into that playstyle. Whereas when you play this way in a self-sustaining way, the sky's the limit with the height of the skill cap that you can have, which rings true to the reason why I wanted the Sombra in our first example instead of a tank character, because if we have another tank in this comp, it would be a resource drain on the team rather than creating space, which is one of the reasons why I rate Sombra so highly in the meta right now, not even necessarily as a damage character, but more so as sort of a cheater pick where you can sneak her in either as a support or even the flex tank in a 3 DPS, which is what we're running on Junkertown here, because characters that are self-sustaining and can go off on their own little missions like I'm doing here with Sombra create space for the team. They allow for too much chaos to be going on for the enemy to really account for all the different variables. The enemy here again is running this Reinhardt Zarya composition, which physically cannot respond to a Sombra being in their back line. You have to go to Winston D.Va. D.Va can decloak the Sombra, spamming at different angles, and they actually can dive on some of these flankers in order to stop them from doing whatever they want. They stay on the Rein Zarya, and me and the Genji can dance around them forever. So if you're looking to try to create this self-sustaining style of play, the characters you want to think about that can do it are flankers, especially Tracer and Sombra, but you can adapt these strategies to almost any type of character, but you'll want to try to prefer and lean on the different picks that enable that playstyle. In those different situations where we're running in comps where everyone kind of needs to self-sustain, I have to be playing Lucio, because if I'm playing a healer that's exploitable and I can't provide space for the team by adding disruption and peel, and I instead need peel myself, I'm becoming a resource drain on the team rather than creating space. And to be clear, it's okay to be a character that requires a resource drain. Widowmaker, McCree oftentimes are the characters that are going to be getting dove and kind of need a village in order to keep them up. That style of play definitely has its merits as well, but it's important to know whether the characters on your team require pocketing in order to work, or if they can get their job done without a lot of help. So how are you able to do this as a tank player? Well, we've kind of already said the Winston Diva situation. As long as they play better and play to get favorable fights and don't need healing to bail them out, they can succeed, especially when they use their ults as an extra life. Reinhardt is the exact opposite, which is why the 3-3 comp is so popular, because he does in fact get a lot more added benefit when he's brawling and getting a lot of resources put into him so he can W mouse 1 into the enemy team. But if you as a tank player are trying to emulate this playstyle, the number one main tank you want to think about is Orisa, because Orisa has a keep away playstyle anyway. She doesn't do it from mobility, but instead she does it from setting up defensively and turtling back and back and back, avoiding taking damage whenever possible. Here's a Route 66 game that was a serious grind of a match. We were losing at the start, went to a bastion ourselves to complete the map. Now the enemy's attempting to do the same thing back to us, and here we're running Mercy Brigitte as our support duo, which frankly is quite a low amount of healing, but as the Orisa player here, really my job isn't to get my face in the way of the damage. That's not gonna work. I need my bunker to set up angles for my team to play around and get value from my ults and damage myself without needing healing, because my teammates really who are trying to make the plays need to be receiving the armor packs, Mercy damage amp, and heals. You can see more of this in any of my Orisa guides that are on the channel, but she in particular is the best tank in order to emulate this low resource requiring playstyle, and is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum when compared to Winston, who probably wants to use his mobility to get to places that are hard to receive damage while still providing his presence. Orisa instead gets in defensive positioning that hunkers her down in a way that it's just way too expensive to go get her. The last example I want to give is another reason why you may want to consider swapping off healer, and I think the number one example in matchmaking right now is to make sure that your team counters something the enemy's doing way too well. Now, this first round of Oasis, we're running what I would consider one of the top of the meta strats. Brigitte in a damage slot, Lucio Ana, dive tanks. Man, this is a incredibly effective team comp. And in this game, we're actually playing against a 3-stack of top 500s. I ended up playing them a few times in this session. These guys are no slouches. But with the big map, I feel like myself and the tanks do a good job of peeling back in order to handle the enemy dives onto our Ana and Hanzo, making it expensive for them, and just having a presence throughout the map. We ended up beating them this round with what I would say is fairly standard play. 3 supports, tons of healing, very common for everyone to feel secure playing in that environment. However, going into the next round, it proved to not be enough. Because the map was a lot smaller, we couldn't outplay them with positioning quite as well, and of course, it's more of a Rein Zarya map. They had a Pharah pummeling us from the sky, and a Doomfist making disruption in the back. So despite having all the support healing in the world in order to pump into our front line, they were winning the battle overall. My first thought is to swap to a Zen, can help us burst down some kills maybe, still provide some support, but that's right, Doomfist is in the game, and you play against a top-level Doomfist as Zen, you're just dead every time. So I say forget all that noise. We're gonna have to play with a little bit less healing right now and at least combat something that the enemy's doing well. This works because it's about the utility that your picks bring, not just the amount of healing that your team's going to have. Roadhog somewhat is kind of a cheater example in this case because he could of course can heal himself, but at the same time, I think when you're in your own games, you sort of have to bend and break these rules and look at what the enemy's beating you with. If the Doomfist and Pharah are making too much space, you kind of have to pick one of them to counter or you will just lose the game. So perhaps I could go Widow here and maybe snipe the Pharah out of the sky, or maybe McCree in order to handle the Doomfist, but my choice ultimately is the Roadhog, which is going to help us win the frontline battle. Hog's good at dishing out damage to tanks, but also more importantly, getting a reliable hook on Doomfist. I'm not very good at Roadhog overall, but I'm good enough at least to try to dissuade a Doomfist from taking over the game. In my Season 11 Hero Rankings video, I drastically underrated Roadhog based on the assumption that there's so many counters that people will likely pick if you pick him. However, at least in my games, it seems like players really one-trick out playing Hammond and Doomfist way too much, and with that being the case, I think swapping to a Hog is probably one of the best counter picks in ranked from what I can tell. I think Hog is very exploitable and counterable, but that might not matter if the enemy just keeps hard-headedly running characters like Doomfist and Hammond into him. So, all things considered, I hope this video was useful. Playing in ranked, it often is a balancing act of figuring out how to make the best use of the team comp you have, and hopefully with what we've discussed in today's video, you're more easily able to flex around and manipulate team comps in a way that will be helpful in bringing out the best of the types of heroes that you have on your team. You don't want to be plugging holes in a sinking ship, trying to layer on way too much healing to try to make up for a playstyle that isn't working. Sometimes you have to bend and break perceived assumptions like we need a lot of healing, and instead find the elements that your team comp actually needs in order to counter what the enemy's doing and get yourself some free SR. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.